So this is what we're dealing with. This is like my tiny little hand for reference. This canvas is about half the size of me, which is slightly intimidating. It's really hard to get this all in one frame, so I'll hopefully do something with that so you can see the whole sketch. But we're going to start off by blocking in the background. When you're working with a black background with a black and white subject, it's a good idea to block in some of the black first so that you have a frame of reference for your tonal values. And I've found that from doing endless things with black backgrounds this year, if I don't do a bit of that first, then I do things way too light and it looks really weird when you actually have the background on. So doing that first is the best way forward. As you can see, there's some like mistakes here that I've just left on because I'm going to paint them over. So it doesn't really matter. And turns out this canvas is really hard to erase things on. So we're going to be doing a lot of paint touch-ups to cover up my mistakes. So there's a couple little bits on this because I've done this quite diluted just as like a base layer that are a bit faded. So if I go like this bit particularly is a culprit, but I want to be careful with it because it's so close to the nose, and that's one of the sort of harder forms, I guess, in a tiger, so I can't really cover it up if I do it wrong. Like, I could paint over it, but that's an extremely big waste of time when you can just err on the side of caution, she says. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dilute a little bit more paint while it's still slightly damp and take a... where are you? There you are. This is a smaller brush, so the one I used before is like a medium wall painting brush just for the sake of speed. This is just like a big brush. I think I got it off Amazon like 7 years ago. But it's incredibly soft and really nice to use. And I'm just going to work my way in. It's very tempting with something like this to just go straight for the edge. I feel like if you do that with paintbrushes, when you push on the canvas, your brush expands. So it kind of gives you a false sense of security when the brush isn't actually touching the canvas, and you're more likely to go in a bit too hard and make a mistake. And I'm just sort of gliding in at a bit of an angle and slowly picking away at these curves. The bits where the fur are, I'm not so fussed about them being perfect because I'm probably going to fade the tiger in quite dark. So like these sort of areas I'm not so fussed about, and they're naturally a bit darker on a tiger anyway, so like got a little bit of wiggle room there, but the OCD in me does desperately want to go over them. It's more this sort of region of the nose that I'm worried about because I kind of want to get right in there. A sort of 3/4 angle when you have a tiger, if you do this bit of the nose completely flat, it looks kind of weird. From kind of every angle you can sort of see their nostril a bit because they've got really three-dimensional noses, especially compared to us. Like from us, like you turn sideways, ooh, how do I show you this? This is hard. You kind of look like a triangle and you can only see one nostril. With tigers, because their faces are so curved, they're not like a flat plane on the front, you can still see the sort of hidden nostril from every angle, so having that little indent is really important for that extra dimension. And what I'll probably end up doing is I'll probably go in and like clean it up a bit more when I'm doing the sort of body work of the painting, but my main goal for tonight, because this is going to take a hell of a long time to dry, is to get a lot of the black work done. Alright, so I'm contradicting myself slightly. You might hear some weird slapping sounds right now. That's me just mixing some paint. I'm using the same palette because I'm gross, and I'm using, I don't know if you can see that, there's a little bit of really watered down black and just a shit ton of white. And I'm just mixing it all up to get a sort of, probably not my lightest tone, but like a really light grey. Maybe a couple of tones darker than what I want it to be, but it's fine because we're just going to blend this shit out. Normally what I would do is I'd cover all the black spots in black, but this guy is really tonal. I got this big brush and I'm rather enjoying slapping some paint on. So I think I'm gonna just go for it and start blocking in some tonal areas just to see. Who knows, maybe this will be my new thing. So it's been over a week and life just got in the way, but I thought I'd give you a wee update. So I did some work off camera. We have a little splodge here, but I'm going to leave it. And I've often been asked what do I do with this sort of situation. I just had some acrylic paint explode on me. And I think just for the sake of having fun, we're just going to put this on there. Makes me feel like a kid, and no matter what I do, it seems to just keep spreading more and more. I'm hoping this is a slightly better light grey, but I'm not convinced, so let's give it a go, because once this dried, this got much darker than I was ready for, and I'm hoping for the best. Here. Still pretty dark, but might actually be quite good for a gradient, so as it Bob Ross says, happy accidents. I think the trick with tigers particularly is you want a lot of depth in your colour, even if you're not doing them in colour, if that makes sense. So like even in grayscale you kind of want a lot of that depth in fur because they're really lush animals. And for sure, I've been like glaring at this for a week. That's part of my creative process, I suppose, is I often sit and stare at things until they annoy me enough to actually do something about what's annoying me. And for sure, I can tell I've gone very, very dark in some places that shouldn't be so much. So this is me on my weekend doing something about it. I can see why art therapy is a thing, actually. I don't know, like, I was thinking about this the other day, and like, I've got some stuff coming up where I might have to talk about my artwork and things. I'm going to be in the Macmillan Art Show shortly, and I'm applying for a bunch of stuff. This is actually for an application, funnily enough. Whether or not I get it, I don't know, but, you know, I like having something to work towards. It motivates me quite a lot when I'm making stuff to have like a reason for what I'm doing, you know. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, irritation is definitely like a big thing for me. Like, I'm slightly OCD, and this is kind of how I vet that, you know. And it's a very good motivator, but I also feel like it's therapeutic at the same time. It allows me to take control of a situation and things to my will, which is good for my God complex as well. Nah, like, it's a healthy thing, I think, to have a hobby like this, particularly if you're feeling a bit maybe like out of control of your situation. You know, it can be a nice way to sort of take back control of your life, do something productive with your hands, and, you know, mitigate maybe negative feelings that you have going on. I for sure have used it as an excuse for that many, many times in my life. I've used this as like a source of therapy, that's for sure. You know, so if it's something that you struggle with, I would highly recommend it. It's a great tool to have at your therapeutic disposal, I would say. This is still really dark. And no matter what I do, I seem to just mix like a very similar grey, so I'm just going to go in with white. I'm just going to go in with white and say a little prayer in hope that I can brighten this back up and bring back some of that contrast. I've still got a slightly damp light grey as well, so I'm going to be using a smaller brush and just like getting some different textures in here, like smoother ones. A lot of this is going to get covered up as well, so like, you know, about 80% of this is going to be black. So I'm not wearing too much, it's just I really want to reinforce certain areas that are going to have a lot of black in particular so that they don't look too flat. Ooh, this is working quite well, actually. I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, if I'm honest, because it is winter and we are in Scotland, and like I've probably said already, it is pitch bloody black and it is 3 o'clock outside right now, which is slightly concerning, but some countries have it much worse than us, so I'm not complaining. But yeah, it's not ideal when you're trying to highlight your artwork and you're coming home from work and it's already pitch black and kind of like you've been working at 2 AM in peak summer. Not great, really. Alright, so I've done, I don't know if you can see that, a little bit of work off camera. It looks like a big blurry mess right now because it is, but I brought those light tones all the way back up again, and now we're going to do the opposite. And just for context, Ooh, this is what my palette looks like. That is sort of like the base light grey. That's the white that we've just used. I've now made a much darker grey. And we're going to use a smaller brush now, sort of from here on out, just to start building up the actual face, because right now it looks like a spooky ghost. Again, this is still slightly wet. Kind of doing that on purpose, kind of also doing it out of laziness, if I'm honest. You know, take from that what you will. But I think it's important to find that balance when one makes an art of what you can actually have the energy to do, because otherwise you're not going to finish anything, realistically. See how dark that is in comparison now. But we got a bit more tonal value going on, so I actually don't mind it. And I'm kind of planning out where I'm going to start adding those lovely details in. So I think that's the next step after this. I think we should start blocking in some of that black so I don't waste too much time on this part. I like a lot of darkness around a tiger eye. I think it adds to the form of the face. I think it just looks a little bit juicy and nice. Darken up this nose area because that's way too light. Is that right? I am also constantly looking at my reference photos still, because I'm sort of working semi-realistically. I do like to have my reference photo on the go at all times. I'm just going to darken all of this in just now. It's not going to get any lighter here, because that is a big patch of black fur that tigers have around their jowls. I'm just going to darken that in so I don't forget it's there. And you're starting to get that nice tigery contrast. Let's move you back a bit so you can get the whole vibe. How about that? Yeah, that's a bit better. I'm finding this quite hard to film, I'm not gonna lie. Just because I'm so used to working on smaller stuff, so I would just do like a good old top-down kind of vibe and call it a day. That's not gonna work for this, so I am literally like standing up and painting this as well, which is something I'm not used to. I'm not a huge fan of, if I'm honest. Like, I'm not the most physical painter in that sense. Like, I'm not like, yeah, let's get in there and do this, that and the other. I like my creature comforts and I like to be comfortable when I create. Around about this point of the video, if you heard me sniffling throughout, I got the flu from hell. So for the last part of this video, you get to hear my relaxing, dulcet tones via voiceover, because I lost my voice. And because of that, and because of getting sick, this whole thing took about 3 weeks to paint on and off. I also work a 9-to-5 job, so, you know, I don't have as much free time as like someone that gets to do this full time. If there's any agents watching, I'm available. That would be pretty cool. And really all I'm doing here is adding in 1,000 tiny hair strokes. I start off doing it in white and then I move it into black. And the reason that I do this is so that the tiger doesn't look blocky. And I'm a bit sneaky about this, and this is a hot tip actually for anyone trying to do this at home. I focus on high areas of contrast. So I put a lot of white where there's pitch black, and then I do the opposite and I put black where there's white. And the reason for this is to save a bit of time as well, but it's where your eye is going to focus on the most. So the highest areas of contrast pure black and pure white are where your eye is going to get drawn to the most. So it'll be like the outline of the cat in this case, the nose, particularly around the nostril, and anywhere there's markings. This is also like an art theory, color theory tip, I suppose, if you're doing an animal with its eyes open. Your eye is always going to get drawn to an animal's eye before anything else in a painting if it's open, because your darkest point should be the pupil and your lightest point should be any highlights on the eye. If you do that, no matter what style that you work in, your stuff is always going to look really alive. To reinforce the markings, I went over it with white, like I've just described. It's a good area of contrast, but I'm also redefining the shapes of everything. So some places I went a bit ham with the big brush, basically, and I'm sort of editing and fine-tuning them to match my reference, which is a photograph I took of an actual tiger in Edinburgh Zoo this year. At this point, I'm adding more dimension to the layering of fur. So as you can see at the bottom of this marking, I've gone over the black with white, and now I'm doing the opposite. The reason I'm doing that is to make things look a bit more three-dimensional. Fur is layered, you know? So I'm kind of picking and choosing areas for that to make things look more 3D. The most important bit of any tiger, apart from the eyes, is the whiskers. Tigers have the most beautiful, dramatic whiskers on the planet. If you mess this up, you kind of mess up the whole tiger. It's super important. I feel like I'm pretty good at this point in my life at doing a good whisker. Good set of whiskers, even. The way that I do it is I try and do them in one stroke whenever possible. I think people get a bit nervous when they go in to do things like this because it feels very permanent. But you kind of just gotta go fast and hard, not think too much about it as you're doing it, because it will make you sort of waver. You'll get a wobble. You know, at the end of the day, these are natural things. They're animals. They're not perfect sculptures. And their whiskers aren't perfectly straight. They're not perfectly uniform. You can get away with a lot. But I try and do it in one stroke as well, because you get a really nice taper to your whiskers if you can do it in one stroke. Here I'm sort of going over areas that touch the black just to make the white pop a little bit more. But this is live. This is like not sped up. This is how fast I do my whiskers in real time. The quicker you do it, the more confidence that you put behind your strokes, the better your whiskers will look, just as a rule of thumb. The area around the gels, which is solid black as well, is kind of where you want to concentrate the majority of your big whiskers. Whiskers on tigers are quite heavy, and so they do have a natural down curve to them over their mouths, and it's kind of the best place to sort of focus your energy. I really liked how this Ohuhu pen. It's an acrylic marker. They're dead cheap. I got a pack of like 50 for next to nothing in a sale. But I really liked how it was working because it's a nice brush tip. It's not pristine white, but it's pretty close. And it's a little bit blendable on canvas, which was really nice. And I just used it here to reinforce the highlights on the nose. I then, off camera after this, went around the entirety of the cat and added in some really, really fine hairs to the entire sort of exterior of the cat, any of the areas touching the black background, just to really make it furry. I then started working on the background. I wanted it to be kind of surreal and a bit dreamlike. And tigers are really avid swimmers. So I went through a bunch of different ideas for this background. But I decided I kind of wanted it to look like oil and water, or really pitch black water, like if you see the ocean at night. Kind of spooky, but pretty, a little bit ethereal. And I figured, like, what would tigers be dreaming about? They might be dreaming about going for a good swim, having a big nap after eating something, you know? Like, I just kind of wanted to keep it loose and open. And I'm so happy with how this turned out. This was a total fluke. At this stage, I had just blocked in the sort of grey areas, and I did not like how it was looking. And I was going to paint over the whole thing, actually. You know, a lot of making art is accepting your mistakes and like just trying to work it out. And I did, in a big way. And all it needed was some more dimension, because all of that layering I did with the tiger made the background look super flat, and it needed more tonal values to match the overall painting, basically. It just needed a bit more, you know, a bit of a zhuzh. And adding in these sort of darker grey areas really did that in a big way. So this is the final painting, which is kind of cool. And as you can see, it's literally half the size of me, which is fun. I've never done a painting this big before, but I'm really pleased with how it's sort of come out. And I love this. Weirdly, out with animals, water is something that I've always sort of painted on and off across the years, or over the years, if I'm speaking properly. But I've never really quite found a way that I like it, and I think it's because I should have been painting it, not drawing it. So I'm really happy with how this has come out, and it's sort of weird. I don't know what I've done, but I don't know if this is showing up on camera. Depending on where it is, it actually kind of looks reflective, which is really weird. I don't know how I've done that. That was an accident. But yeah, pretty pleased. Kind of cool. Love how it came out.